So I got these two lines and two on my back that's kind of disappeared from a henna tattoo that literally never went away. I got the craziest reaction where it like welted and was so itchy, and it has these have been here since like last year, early last year. And I'm kind of over it, like I don't know how long they're going to be here. Anyway, it kind of bothers me in this video. Something that was temporary. It was kind of one of those things, when you're sad, so you get a tattoo. I was like, I'll get a henna. And it just became one of these. At first, I was like, I'm a warrior. You see it? You kind of see the outline still on my back, but yeah. Anyway, I woke up in the big city of Indianapolis this morning, and I have about maybe another 24 hours here. And I was like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do for 30 hours? I didn't really prepare for this trip mentally as I should have, or make plans, because I have plans for things in my life. And I thought that maybe I should take this time to open up a book or write. And even though I'm tired of that, I'm tired of being in my own thoughts. I'll get something else. I remember I was on the plane and this guy, I'm always interested in their books. And I was like, what are you reading? And I was like, is this, an environmental book? And he was like, yeah, I think so. I said, can I read the back of it? He's like, yeah. I was like, it seems very interesting. And I told him about a book. I told him about a book that it reminded me of. And I was like, that's really good. Something other than ourselves. Right? And he was like, yeah, something other than ourselves. And I think that's so important. The other day, I went to the library, and I love libraries so much, but I've always been really bad when it comes to the library, because maybe this tells you a little bit about my character, but I never gave it back. I never give the books back. And ever since I was younger, and there was this woman at my church that worked for the library, and she would see me in church and be like, you need to return your books. And I'm like, okay, I will. Even though I think that that's hard for a kid, right? Because it's like, how am I going to return the book? Like, I'm not in charge of my transportation or where and how I go, but if I think the library is like equivalent to a pet. Like, library books are equivalent to like a pet. Like, it teaches responsibility 100%. And I already know what types of pets my kids are getting, but that's for a different day. Anyway, so yeah, I love the library now. I probably owe them a book. And I hate to admit that, but I'm just not good at returning books. So I buy my books, and they have really become an investment in my life. Definitely for me, but definitely for when I leave, because that's definitely going to happen. I remember I was at I'm not going to say what library. No, I could say at the Roosevelt Library on Long Island. And I remember just walking in there a couple of years ago, and they had the nicest librarian. I've never seen a librarian with a Chanel bag. She had a Chanel bag. And the one that I like dream about, like, I don't even know, like, that's the only Chanel bag that I like the little bucket bag. Like, I don't even know if it's called a bucket bag, if I call it a bucket bag. I don't even care for the flap over, blah, blah. I like the little black crisscross Chanel bag. The stitching is crisscross on it, and it has a little chain, but it's not a crossbody. It's a Anyway, the librarian had a Chanel bag, and she was the nicest lady ever. And I actually saw her again in the supermarket a couple months ago, actually, and I remembered her and she remembered me. But what made our my visit so memorable was the fact that they had this archive of this guy. He used to teach at Nassau Community College, and he was a professor there. And they had his whole entire book collection available. And I was like, why would you guys let people take his books out? Like, you guys trust people that much? And they were like, yes, we want you to take the book, not take the books, like obviously return the books, but like, we want people to take these books out. We want people to read these books. Like, it was like copies of like, like the rarest copies of things, but it was the most vulnerable thing too, because he was into a lot of things and it was a vulnerable thing. And I feel like that's what that archive and that collection is. It's vulnerability. And my journals, it's vulnerability. My books is vulnerability, and it says a lot about that person and what it is that they cared about. And maybe it's all vain, maybe it's all like, who cares? And I feel that way too about a lot of things. Like, who cares? Like, why is this important? What is the importance in this? And a lot of things are not important, when you think about it. Like, we dress up these things as so important and give so much energy into things that we feel are so important. And, one day I feel like it is, and one day I feel that it's not. And I wrestle with those things too. So I bought a bunch of books on my layover because I couldn't decide which one that I wanted to, settle down on at this moment. And very, very rarely do I settle down with one book. I read whoever I want to read at that day. I swear to God, I wish I was like this in relationships, but I'm totally not. Oh my God. Anyway. Yeah, so I'm the type of person who reads a book where I'm like, don't want to read this today. Okay. It's like a record player where, like, okay, the record is spinning, and then I pause it. And I'm like, that was beautiful for today, because that's how I felt today. And then today, this is how I feel. And today, this is how I feel. And I'll come back to this when I want to get here. And sometimes books get finished and sometimes they don't. But we keep getting them because of this archive that's going to be so important, And okay, so the first book that I have here is the autobiography of Malcolm X. I took the dust cover off because I don't want to mess up the dust cover. Like, I just don't. I've had this book for about a year now, a couple years, maybe a year and a half, maybe. And I have yet to get to it because sometimes I don't want to be in this space. Sometimes I don't want to be in this space. Sometimes I want to be in the ocean. Not the physical ocean, but like, yeah, the physical ocean, where it's like, one of my favorite books is How the Ocean Works. That's the name of it. This woman devoted her whole life to it. I don't remember her name, but yeah, her book is really good and breaks down the ocean in ways that you could never even imagine. But yeah, I flipped open this book and I got to a page where he was basically talking about all the philosophers. And he included one of my favorite, Nietzsche. But when you think about philosophy, and this is what he said too, and partly I agree. I like individual philosophy, sometimes to think about certain things. My major in college was philosophy, and I wanted to be a doctor. I was gonna make it work. I wanted to be an anesthesiologist, and I was like, I can do philosophy as long as I get my prereqs in, and because none of these classes are interesting to me. But the classes on the catalog was like, what is love? What is God? what is the mind, the working, da, 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 da. And I was like, these are the only things that seem interesting. All these other classes sound like I'm going to hate them. And yeah, so we'll talk about school maybe at another time. I don't want to drag this out, but yeah, he was I scammed through, and it was a page where he was like, they just argue about a whole bunch of things that literally don't matter. And in a way, it's very, 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 very true. So that's why I picked this one up, because maybe I want to read it. This one was another one where I paused the record player, not because it was bad, but because it was so good. This is Muhammad Ali, The Greatest, My Own Story, Muhammad Ali. Honestly, and look, I put poet, because if you know him, you know that he was a poet. Yeah, I paused this one because it was too good. And this is one of those books that I just didn't want to finish. Like, I just don't want to finish it. Like, I don't want it to be over. I know somebody has a philosophy about that, right? You have to, no, I don't want it to be over. So I've been letting that one marinate. This one is something different. This is called The Radiance of a King. The Radiance of the King by Kamara Lay, I believe. And I found this one actually through a Toni Morrison book that I felt was so difficult to read. Like, I was so frustrated reading it. So frustrated. And because it was like repeating, and like I was like, I just read this last chapter. Am I reading the same thing over and over? But she was repeating herself. Like, it was so frustrating. Like, love the lady, love her interviews, still have not been able to penetrate her books for like years. I'm still trying. But I did get this book from her book. That is one thing that I did get from it. And this book is basically about, first of all, there are all these images and ideas of Africa that are out there, and a lot of them portray Africa for their own, just, it's not a real portrayal of what Africa is. And that's why Kamara Lai decided that he wanted to write a book with the real backdrop of what Africa really was and is to him, because he's from there and lived in it. And this book is basically about a very entitled man who comes and is like, I need a meeting with the king. And the king is like, staying where he's at. And he couldn't access the king until he was stripped of a lot of things. So he came into this land very entitled. And after he lost everything, that's when he met the king. But nobody really knows if the king is a metaphor, if the king is real. I would have to read it. But I thought that this was very intriguing. One, because it was an example of relationships and like coming into a land and feeling entitled to something. And, you don't gain access you shouldn't gain access until you realize a couple things. I actually gifted this book to an entitled asshole, but that's besides the point. He will never he will never understand why it's in his collection. He will never understand. Anyway, and at least it's there. It's like the energy. Like, you have to give people books because of what the energy of the book brings. Maybe it'll like create some osmosis, but that's here nor there. It's not our job to do that. Anyway, the next one is Throw. Now, I bought this because I like these. I like these Penguin classics where they take one author, one writer, and condense all their books into one book. I read Civil Disobedience. Civil Disobedience is so sharp. Civil Disobedience is so precise. And I really will say that he was eating them up. He was eating America up, or wherever he was. He was eating them. Yes, because he was an ally. And he was an ally for Black people. And this is why I want you guys to know, like, should he be celebrated for Black History Month? No, because he's not Black. But he was an ally. He was an ally. Anyway, I went to the library and I was very surprised to see that because I was in the environmental nature section, and he wrote books on that. Like, he was real about ecology, and I learned that the ecology became before the politic. And I'm like, someone who observes, the handiwork of God in such a intimate way, of course they're not gonna, agree with what's going around them in this human man-made stuff, So he wrote this book called Walden. I hope that I'm saying it right. Of his experience near this Walden lake or pond or whatever it is. But it's, I'm interested. I'm interested in Thoreau in this lens. So that's that. I bought this in the airport. It's called Nature. It's by Ralph Waldo Emerson. And I thought, when I was looking into Thoreau, they told me that Emerson is the one who inspired him. I bought this in the airport, and I just love that these guys were friends and they're friends in my collection. I didn't do that on purpose. Like, I was like, whoa, like, this is crazy, friends inspired each other. I love that cohesion. And this one I think is very important. Oh my God, sorry, my nose. This one is very important. This is called The Sisterhood. And this is basically about Black organization. There were a bunch of, not an organization, but organization. There were a bunch of Black people that were coming together in a certain time period. This is, 1970s. So in the 70s, 80s, there were all these writers coming together to make sure that their voices were being heard through writing. These women, all on the cover here, you have Toni Morrison, Alice Walker, I don't know how to say her name, Shanaj, and other Black women met at June Jordan's Brooklyn apartment to eat gumbo, drink champagne, and talk about their work. And they called themselves the Sisterhood. Audre Lorde was also a part of it. And a lot of really important people. And I just love the fact that, they took minutes of their meetings. Like, I love minutes of a meeting. And they archived their work because they knew that it was going to be important one day. So I'm really interested. I really want to read this book. And, there you have it. So that's what I will be doing on my 30-hour layover. I hope. But I just wanted to share some of these books. I might, find something to do. Go to the gym or something like that. But yeah. So those are my books. And look into them. Okay. Bye.